Welcome, everybody, to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. We are back. I'm sorry, I know it's been a little while, but we are back. We are previewing the draft. Come join us live on YouTube if you're available this morning. If you're listening later, we appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. We are happy to be back, and I got a little bit of sad news. Kyle Neighbors has left. He is on his way to the Seattle Times, so you're going to have to direct Kyle your Seattle Seahawks questions these days. But we appreciate Kyle for everything he's done for the show and for us. And joining me this morning is Michael Dwojak. Michael, how you doing?
Good. How we doing? We got a draft to talk about and stadium to talk about. A lot of different things we can touch on this morning.
Yeah, we have a busy couple of days here. I'm sure Bears fans are well aware that there's a stadium announcement coming here. As soon as we're done recording this, I'm gonna hop in the car and get down to Soldier Field and see what exactly this announcement's gonna look like. I don't want to spend too much time on that because by this afternoon, I assume we're going to have renderings. There's going to be a lot more to discuss later. But at this point, Michael, are you surprised that it appears the lakefront is the number one priority? What do you think this means for Arlington Heights?
Well, I don't know if it necessarily means things are over at Arlington Heights. I mean, I guess it depends on the announcement, right? Like you've seen the reporting from the Tribune about them asking for around like $1 billion from taxpayer money, and based on what we saw, I don't know if it would go up for a referendum like it did in Kansas City with the Chiefs and the Royals, but I don't think the city is in a place right now to be giving away $1 billion for a football stadium. So, they can, I think they'll have the ceremony. They'll talk about the renderings and the, all that jazz, but there's still a lot of legwork to do before you finally get through it. You got friends through the park you got to deal with. You got, the state legislature to move some hoops around and that kind of stuff for funding. So I think it'll be, I'm sure everyone's excited about it, but I don't think that necessarily means that Arlington Heights is, dead yet. I could very quickly see things get a little bit bottled up here, and maybe the school districts are more lenient on the taxpayer, on that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden they're opening up in Arlington Heights.
Yeah, this is far from a done deal. Even though they're making an announcement today, I'm sure that there will be renderings and that there will be lots to talk about. The release says that representatives from the city will be there and that this is in collaboration. We don't know who exactly that means. Is it going to be the mayor? Is it going to be some other folks? I'm sure we will have a lot more information to unpack with the stadium situation this afternoon. We are recording Wednesday morning for those who are listening in regular podcast form. Head to my Twitter at Sean_Hammond. I'm going to be reporting live from Soldier Field and updating as we get information later this afternoon. So yeah, that's certainly the timing is curious too. We got this coming the day before the draft. It seemed like maybe they could have spread this out a little bit, but I guess they're just going off the good vibes from Caleb Williams tomorrow. And you know what? Michael, we want to spend a lot of time talking about the draft. That's why we're here. We can talk more stadium once we have more information. But Ryan Poles met with us yesterday, met with members of the media, and he didn't say they're taking Caleb Williams, but he kind of said they're taking Caleb Williams.
Yeah, he seemed pretty sly. I mean, every question he was answering was about Caleb Williams. Like, I don't know if there were like other questions about other quarterbacks, but I feel like it's the worst kept secret at this point, right? Like, I mean, does anyone doubt that they're like, trading or taking anyone else? I mean, I think honestly, like if he played this so well where like he ends up like trading it or takes Drake May or whatever, I honestly think that'd be like one of the biggest, sudden moves of the decade. Like that, I feel like this has just been linked up ever since Justin Fields got traded, and he didn't really, do anything to make you feel like it was going to be different. So, I mean, Caleb Williams is obviously going to be drafted number 1 overall. We'll obviously break down what that means for the franchise and, him and all that kind of stuff. But I do think that a priority now is pretty much what are they going to do at number 9? Are they going to trade up? Are they going to trade down? Are they going to keep around? Like it's really interesting because I feel like everyone knows what the Bears are going to do, and I think a lot of people know what the Commanders are going to do, right? Or a lot of people think that Daniels is going to go number 2 at this point. So if so, like I feel like the draft really doesn't start until 3 or 4 when are the Patriots going to take Drake May, or are the Cardinals going to trade a number 4 pick? So I think that's really when things get started here.
Yeah, all along, not to get a sidetrack talking about the Commanders, but yeah, all along, for me, I look at it and I think Drake May is the guy to go with at number 2. But
Yeah.
all signs point towards the Commanders wanting to go with Jaden Daniels. It seems like that's what they're going to do, unless this is a giant smokescreen. That's kind of flipped. He's become the favorite just in the last month or 6 weeks or whatever to become that number 2 pick. And like if you were, if you read Ryan Pohl's quotes yesterday, it maybe would have been harder to tell. But if you went and watched the video, his face tells the story when he was answering those questions about Caleb. Like, he said, well, I'll have to tune in on Thursday. He had a huge, a mischievous grin on his face when he said that. So I think that kind of told us more than what his actual words said. He was asked if the league told him not to say, and he said no. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know. I'm sure the NFL will use all 10 minutes of that allotted time to drum up the excitement for this Caleb Williams pick.
Could you imagine the reaction from like the NFL offices if Ryan Poles yesterday was just like, yeah, I'm taking Caleb Williams. That's what we're doing. Like what? I don't even know, like, could they find him or anything like that? Just like, it seems like it would be like the biggest, like, why would you ever do that? But yeah, that was kind of an interesting, response just to be like personal policy. But I feel like the NFL would also be pretty upset if you just, took away, whatever it's been 3 months of promotion for the number 1 pick.
This is one of their biggest TV events, and
Right.
yeah, and certainly the biggest one of the offseason. And I don't think Ryan Poles, whether he was told not to say or not, I don't think he wants to deal with any of that. He's trying to stay under the radar a little bit. There was some talk yesterday too, while we're on Caleb Williams, about this dinner that Caleb had with some of his teammates. TJ Edwards was asked about it. He won the Brian Piccolo Award yesterday, and was answering some questions with the media, and didn't want to say too much. I think I didn't necessarily expect him to say too much. They haven't drafted Caleb yet, and I'm sure that they'll be a little bit more candid about what went down once they do. But it sounds like TJ, it sounds like maybe Cole Kmet, maybe DJ Moore were all present for dinner when Caleb was here for his 30 visit. I think that's a really interesting tactic, and getting some of those veteran leaders to talk to this guy. I think that's a really smart move. When you're in this situation where you can take whoever you want, if the Bears want Caleb Williams, as we've kind of seen, they're really zeroed in on him. You have the luxury of being able to think outside the box a little bit. I'm sure, Ryan Poles could have sat down with Caleb for another dinner, but they did that at his pro day. And yeah, maybe it's more valuable to get some of the players' insight. And I think that, Ryan Poles trusts his veterans. What did you think about the decision to do that, Michael?
I thought that was interesting. I thought it was interesting just to, kind of get input, have him like sit around. I think it's been reported that, he was in a separate room and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
let them go after it, which is interesting. I feel like that can go, one of 2 ways. I feel like you can, I don't know if this is like a great comparison, but I feel like it's kind of when like your sibling or something like that starts dating someone, and then you just kind of like try to get to figure out like, oh, do I like this person or not? I feel like that it was kind of those kind of vibes for me, where it's just kind of like, all right, are we going to like this person? Like they're going to be part of the family eventually. Like, do we want them around and that kind of stuff? But I do think that was kind of interesting. Just being able to kind of get some veteran guys. Maybe they were kind of able to set the tone of kind of being like, well, and I'm not trying to say that, I'm not starting to start this whole, whatever, where it's like, well, Caleb's going to be a problem, whatever, that kind of stuff. But maybe he wanted them to kind of set the tone and be like, listen, like we have a fairly, strong veteran locker room at this point. You got a lot of guys who've been in the league for a little bit. And you can't really come in and, just act like, it's your team, even though a lot of people will say, it's Caleb's team now, obviously, especially if he succeeds. But there are a lot of good veterans on that team who, have NFL experience. So I'm kind of curious to see just, what those conversations are like. Maybe we'll find out a little bit after the draft. But something I was kind of curious with you, just I feel like there's been a lot of talk about, Caleb's, top 30 visit only being with the Bears and that kind of stuff. It seems like the Bears have really honed in on Caleb. Is that a problem for you at all? Like, are you upset about, um, maybe not upset, but just like curious of like, them doing their due diligence and that kind of stuff? I'm not trying to compare it to, Mitch Trubisky when like they
Right.
honed in on Mitch and then, missed out on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. But do you feel like they've done their full process here, even though they didn't do really top 30 visits with other quarterbacks?
I don't think it's a huge concern that they didn't do top 30 with other quarterbacks. I mean, you're meeting with these other quarterbacks in other settings. You meet with these guys at the combine. You can meet with them around their pro day. And sometimes you look at that list of the athletes that they have for the top 30, and there's some interesting choices. There's usually a couple of guys who aren't the top draft picks that are, maybe just guys that they're a little bit more curious about, or guys they have medical concerns about, later round picks and stuff like that. So I'm not super concerned about that. And look, it comes down to this: if Ryan Poles absolutely loves the film with Caleb Williams, way more than anybody else, and he started digging into, okay, what about the person? And if all signs point to he likes everything he's hearing about the person, then I am okay with that. If you think this guy is far and away the best tape of any of these quarterbacks, and there's no red flags, like I don't think you necessarily. It doesn't necessarily matter what the personally what the other quarterbacks are going to bring to the table, because if this is your guy, this is your guy, and that's really what it comes down to me. I know they've met with some of these other quarterbacks outside of the top 30 visits. There's other opportunities to do that, but I think if this is your guy, you got to spend as much time as possible figuring him out before you make this decision.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think you see that commitment that they've kind of had to him, even since like the combine, even like when you still had Justin Fields, like they obviously spent a lot of time with him, hung out with him, before his pro day, all that kind of stuff, his top 30 visit. And it's been pretty talked about that at this point. They're just kind of installing stuff, they're just kind of, going through the offense of what they want to do with Shane Waldron and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I get that. And I think you obviously want to, look at every, leave no stone unturned and all that kind of stuff. But it does seem like that they've, done their due diligence. I'm sure they've, interviewed a million people at this point about Caleb Williams, probably like his preschool teacher. I mean, with how much, these, organizations do. But yeah, I wouldn't think it's pretty concerning at this point, but I was just kind of curious to see just what you thought about it and how he kind of played this whole process with having the number one pick.
It is funny or interesting to look at the difference between that and what the Commanders did, having all those guys over for Topgolf. That is just like the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I don't know what the purpose of having all those guys there at the same time was. I don't,
at that point you kind of ruffle feathers, don't you? Isn't that kind of what happened when Jaden Daniels' agent last week? Or it's kind of like, all right, we're all just going to be here together and hanging out. Like, you could play that a little bit better when you have like all these top prospects coming over. Yeah, that was definitely an interesting move.
I saw some reports on Twitter that Dan Quinn picked up Jaden Daniels and didn't, wasn't at the airport to pick up some of the other guys. I think that maybe tells us a little bit more about what they're thinking than any Topgolf results will tell us. Yeah. But you touched on it, the number 9 pick, Michael. I asked you to send me your top 5, your wants for the Bears at the number 9 pick. We are going to get to some questions in a little bit, guys. If you're watching on Twitter, click through to YouTube. You can throw us your questions in the comments. We are going to get to some questions shortly, but we're going to play a little game here first. We're going to go through our top 5 hopes and dreams for the Bears with that number 9 pick. I had Michael send me his top 5. I made a top 5. I kind of mashed them together, and we're going to go down the list here. And my one stipulation here was, obviously we have them taking Caleb Williams number 1. And we were working off the assumption that Marvin Harrison and Joe Alt are going to be gone by the time the Bears pick at 9. I know they could trade up. That's a possibility. They could trade down. Although Ryan Poles kind of, he mentioned yesterday that he's happy with just 4 picks. I don't know. Does that surprise you at all, Michael?
I feel like it doesn't surprise me too much, just based on they brought in a lot of guys the last couple of
They
years. They
did.
have like 9 picks his first year and 11 picks his second year, so or vice versa, or whatever. But they have a lot of guys. I mean, at this point, and they have a pretty talented team. But obviously, you always want to replenish through the draft. I mean, that's
Mhm.
pretty much how you have a successful team, by replenishing through the draft and not having to overspend in free agency and getting yourself into tough situations. But again, that could just be all for show. Maybe he is going to trade up or down or whatever and try to recoup some picks. But honestly, I'm not really concerned about the 4 picks. I mean, your 4 picks are number 1, 9, which are high value picks. And then
Yeah.
obviously you have a couple picks. And I think it's been really widely reported about how this draft isn't that deep. Like you've got a lot of, COVID kids who've been able to, stay in college a little bit longer, who are finally entering the draft. So if there was a draft that you maybe aren't upset about not having all the picks in, it's probably this one where it's really top heavy. You can get a lot of value in the first half of the draft, but in the later half of the draft, I feel like you're just kind of you're just kind of reaching and you're just kind of hoping, well, maybe this will work out and maybe we can make this work somehow.
Yeah, and Poles said yesterday, which I thought was the most telling thing, is like it's gonna be hard to make the team. You're not gonna have. 2 years ago they had 5 undrafted rookies on the 53-man roster
Right.
in early September. That's not going to happen this year. This team is much, much deeper.
Right.
All right, we're going to go through our top 5 hopes and dreams for the Bears at number 9. And like I said, Joe Alt and Marvin Harrison are off the board. The Bears got a quarterback in Caleb Williams. Maybe I should have said Malik Neighbors is off the board. I don't know. I'm going to cheat already and turn this into our top 6. I'm going to lump Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors together here. We both had these guys at the top of our list. Maybe no surprise. Wide receivers are the fun, exciting position. Michael, make your argument. Why should the Bears go with a wide receiver at the number 9 pick?
Well, I feel like you need to surround Caleb with playmakers. Like I think, you obviously have DJ Moore, and the Keenan Allen trade was good, but Keenan Allen it's funny every time we do this in sports when we say someone is old, but they're like 31, whatever.
Yeah.
And just like, all right, well, I would love to be Keenan Allen.
What does that make me?
Yeah, seriously. Like, it's just like, okay, like he's old, but like, they're still working through the contract situation. And when they like announced, the Keenan Allen deal, he talked about, he wouldn't come here if he didn't want to, stay here and that kind of stuff. But that's still up in the air. And you have the potential to surround Caleb Williams with 2 All-Pro, 3 All-Pro wide receivers his rookie season. And I don't think, you can really pass on that. And, you saw the tweet from Caleb and Rome. They were both on the same flight yesterday. They're all apparently playing catch with each other and that kind of stuff. Look into that, whatever you want. But I just think Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbor obviously is a great wide receiver as well. But I've just been impressed with Rome throughout this process. The more I've watched of him, his combine times, his pro days, all that kind of stuff. I've just been more and more impressed with him, and he's become like my top guy that I want number 9. You have financial flexibility with him and Caleb for the next 4 or 5 years. Why not really have a really strong foundation and, build upon that? And then I know the offensive line isn't perfect yet. The defensive line needs work, but I feel like you can build those positions later on where if you have an opportunity to take a top wide receiver in the league, potentially, you got to take advantage of that.
I love the size that Rome Odunze brings to the table too. That's not that Malik Neighbors is small. I think he's 6 foot flat or something like that. But Rome Odunze has that size that you like to see in those guys. He can go up and get the ball. That's what he did at Washington. Rick here in the comments says 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Odunze. All 5 picks he wants. And Mike here in the comments is saying Odunze is a practical clone of AJ Green. Yeah, that size, that length, you love that. I'm not necessarily sold that Malik Neighbors is going to go ahead of him. I mean, it's hard. Obviously, that's probably what's going to happen. But it's hard to say that, weird things happen with the draft. It's really hard to predict after the first, 3 or 4 picks every year. And so I do think Marvin Harrison is going to be the first one off the board. What happens after that? I don't know. It might just kind of come down to what style of receiver some of these teams want. And so, yeah, I think we're both on the same page. That would be really fun if the Bears could get one of these wide receivers. And look, this is a Bears organization. I know you got Matt Eberflus. He's your defensive guy. You've spent a lot of time and effort building that defense. You've added Montez Sweat, all that stuff, and certainly they need another guy on the defensive line. But if you want to be successful in the modern NFL, you got to upgrade that offense. You need to be able to score points. I really think that adding a receiver, like you said, Michael, that trio that they would have, that is maybe the best trio of receivers that a rookie quarterback could possibly ask for.
And think about how like Odunze and Moore would like complement each other, where like DJ Moore is not a short, wide receiver or anything like that. But I feel like there are two different types of wide receivers where, if Caleb needs, DJ Moore, to hit him on the side, and DJ, can obviously get a lot of yaks and, kind of, do those type of plays. You have that. And then you have Rome Odunze where you can just, chuck it down the field and hope that he can just make a play on the safety or the cornerback. So, and then obviously you have Keenan Allen in the middle, just, running up wherever. And he's like your third option. It's like just burning some, linebacker or something like that. So I just think that it makes too much sense. I think the biggest thing is he still there for them at 9? And do you go up for him, I guess, is the question. I've seen a lot this week because, once we, things kind of get boring after a while and people just come up with, new theories as we get, longer and longer and closer to the draft. But there's talks about trading up for Marvin Harrison. Do you trade up for Marvin Harrison, or do you trade up for, if Rome Odunze is there at 7, do you make that trade, or do you just stay pat and wait at 9, and whoever's at 9, that's who you decide to choose?
Yeah, I would be surprised a little bit if they traded up for a Marvin Harrison. I mean, that means you're trading up to 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Most likely. I think that's probably too rich. But at the same time, I mean, you can make the argument, if there's an elite player and you want to go get him, absolutely do exactly what the Houston Texans did last year with the draft. I know that was a defensive guy, but same concept really. And my only hesitation there is that the Bears don't have a lot of draft picks.
Right.
You'd probably be sending one of your 2 second-round picks next year in order to do that. And I mean, if that's what you want to do, I could get behind that. At the same time, like, I would be less surprised if they moved up a couple of spots to get a guy. I think Tennessee's going to stay where they are. I think they really need a tackle. And I think just about every mock draft in the world has them taking Joe Alt these days, if Alt's still on the board. But the question maybe is more with what Atlanta is going to do at number 8, and would Atlanta shop that pick? Could they, if Atlanta is trying to find somebody to jump up and get that receiver right there, I think the Bears have to be in the conversation to try to make that happen.
Yeah, you would think you need to try to at least, do it. I have seen a couple of mock drafts where somehow like the Bears end up trading with the Chargers and Joe Alt is still available at 9 and, all that kind of stuff. Do you, if Joe Alt is still there, is he your number 1? If he somehow drops and Chargers make some trades or whatever, whether that's with some tier or whatever, would you prioritize Alt over any of the wide receivers, or are you still choosing a wide receiver?
Well, you know what? Let's talk about that, because I threw Olu Fashanu at the end of our list. He was number 5.
Yeah.
We can lump him and Joe Alt together. What do you do? If one of those tackles is there, what do you do? Especially with Joe Alt, I think that's kind of a no-brainer. That dude's a monster. He's 6'9". All indications are he's going to be a starting left tackle right away. And that would be an upgrade, frankly. I mean, it doesn't necessarily fill a hole. I don't see left tackle as a hole. I don't know if Ryan Poles does. I do think they like Braxton Jones. But if you got a chance to really, really upgrade that spot, I don't know if you can pass on that, especially if Joe Alt is there. If you're talking Olu Fashanu versus, say a Dallas Turner or maybe one of the receivers, I think that's a little bit tougher call. They could also trade back a little bit and get Olu or get JC and one of those guys who are going to be there probably in the mid-teens. But I think if Joe Alt's there, you got to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think barring injury, he's probably your left tackle for the next 10 years. Like, you've got him secured. Like, he can protect Caleb. Obviously, you can move Braxton Jones down the line, and then obviously you still need to figure out some stuff on the line and see where all those guys play. But yeah, I do think it's interesting. Do you draft the guy who's going to protect him, Caleb Williams, to make the plays, or do you draft the guy who Caleb Williams is going to make plays too? So I'd be curious where maybe you get Joe Alt, and then maybe you trade that Carolina second round pick for next year, and you jump back into this year's draft in the second round or third round or something like that, and you draft one of these other wide receivers that maybe are more of a project. I don't know. I'm less confident based on on Poles' experience. With Tyler Scott, we still got to figure out, but I don't think he has a great record so far in drafting wide receivers. So I would figure you would take more of the sure thing, but it would be really interesting. Again, this is all hypothetical. Like, all could be taken pretty quickly, so it doesn't really matter. But I think I would probably take the tackle and then just see what happens with the wide receivers that maybe you can jump back into in the later rounds with.
Rick in the comments says Poles loves Braxton, and yeah, that's what I keep coming back to. I believe Poles when he says that he really likes Braxton Jones. I haven't mocked the Bears to a tackle in any of my mock drafts because of that reason. I really do think he likes Braxton. I know it's like, yeah, he's a fifth round pick, from a small school, yada yada, but like, he's been good. He's been it's not like he's a major flaw in your offensive line. Is he Joe Alt? Probably not. But you could another way to get a second round pick too, Michael, is to trade back a little bit, and you could still get a tackle and still get a receiver in the second or third round wherever you trade back. Okay, we're gonna jump gears here. Another guy on our list. I'm all out of order. The list is getting out of whack, but we're gonna go Dallas Turner. We both had this guy on our list. I'm gonna make the argument, Michael. If you can get another edge rusher opposite Montez Sweat, I mean, your defense is basically complete. It's never complete, but there's not a lot of holes on this defense right now. There aren't a whole lot of spots where you point to and say they need to get better. And that second defensive end spot is maybe the only one you could throw, the 3 technique in there as well. Dallas Turner, to me, looks like the best edge rusher in this draft. He's not like super tall. Like Montez Sweat is 6'6". He's a huge dude, huge human being. I think Dallas is only 6'2", but he has the wingspan. He has a wingspan of a bigger dude. And that's what they look for. They look for that length. He watched Will Anderson for a couple years at Alabama. He played alongside Will Anderson and learned from that guy. If you're taking an edge rusher, I think this is who they should take. Michael, I know you had Leatu Latu on your list as well. I think you got to, if these receivers are gone, I think the Bears are going edge rusher. That's just me. Like I said, I think they like Braxton Jones enough that I don't think they're going to go tackle. But if those receivers are gone, I think you go edge rusher. I think you try to upgrade that spot opposite Montez Sweat. DeMarcus Walker is still there, but again, he's a guy who had 3.5 sacks last year. Doesn't really move the needle for a lot of people. I think you still got to get younger too. Unfortunately, Dominique Robinson, the 5th round pick from a couple of years ago, hasn't really done a whole lot. And I think it's time to get a young talent in there at edge rusher. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you would do that. I was kind of disappointed that they didn't get an elite pass rusher to go off of Montez Sweat in free agency. I know that they were in on some of the top guys, but that's still a major need. I think that you got the linebackers, your secondary is great. You got Montez Sweat, but a lot of teams can just double up or triple up on Sweat, and then you don't really have a pass rush. So I think Turner would be. He was at the top of my list when it comes to defensive players. Ladu, I included there. I'm still itchy and scratchy about the health there. I think whenever you have a guy who kind of jumps out there. There's still something there, obviously, if it's been proven correct or whatever, but I'm still a little concerned on that front. Are you buying any of this? I feel like it's come up the last couple of days this Byron Murphy to the Bears connections. Defensive tackle, obviously really important to what Matt Eberflus wants to do in his, defensive scheme. Are you buying that at all? Like, do you see them like trading down and going after him, or are you pretty set that, if all the wide receivers are gone, the Joe Alt is gone, that they're going with an edge rusher as opposed to a defensive tackle?
I'm glad you brought this up. I threw him on the list too. He was number 4 on our list. Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle out of Texas. Yeah, he's gotten, people have been talking about him lately, and there have been some reports that he might be the first defensive player taken, that, maybe it won't be Dallas Turner. Maybe it won't be one of the cornerbacks. Maybe it'll be Byron Murphy. And Ryan Poles had an interesting quote yesterday where he said, asked about defensive end versus defensive tackle. And, would you rather add somebody on the edge, rather add somebody in the middle? And Poles pretty blatantly was like, yeah, when we've in talking, pointing towards Ian Cunningham, they were both at the table, and they're talking about in past places in Philadelphia and in Kansas City, when they've had a really dominant defensive tackle, that has really changed things for the defensive line. And so his answer was basically, yeah, I want a defensive tackle. And yeah. Now it was
the first guy he went after, right? When he took
it was the first guy he went. That's a great point. In free agency 2 years ago, Larry Ogunjobi, that was the first move he made. I generally believe Ryan Poles when he talks. I think he's more honest than a lot of GMs in the league. Yeah. At the same time, my BS radar was going off there a little bit. Just like, why would he be so adamant about that right before the draft? Yeah. Is he so hoping somebody else will move up and draft Byron Murphy? I don't know. Personally, I could see them going either way. I do kind of think I would prioritize the edge. Yeah. Given what this roster looks like right now, you just drafted Gervon Dexter last year. I wouldn't be surprised if they could see Gervon stepping into that starting role. But nothing would surprise me, Michael. Nothing would surprise me.
Yeah, I feel like we're seeing a lot of this in the chat too about, being a lot of, Poles guys and how much he believes in them. And I think Dexter is definitely a Poles guy where, they just got him last year, obviously used a high draft pick on him. So I doubt that, Poles is going to give up on him pretty quickly. I'm curious to see where he grades Murphy compared to Dexter and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I do think I'd be it. If you're taking a defensive player, all the wide receivers are off the board. You got to take an edge rusher. Yeah, they're maybe not as interesting as, Will Anderson was last year, but I do think that he's still a really good edge rusher, even Latu too. And I think that you've got a need there, and then you can fill it with, again, another contract that you won't have to worry about for 5 years. But if you can really pair someone off with Montez Sweat, yeah, that defense is pretty much ready to go, and it's just up to Caleb and the offense to figure things out and figure out whether they can compete in the modern NFL.
And just like the offensive tackle discussion, like you could trade back a couple of spots, yeah, and still get an edge rusher. Especially like you said, there's no Will Anderson this year. There's no sure number one edge rusher. If you kind of view all three of these guys, 4 or 5, however many guys you want to include in that conversation, as somewhat interchangeable, you could move back a little bit. Pick up an additional draft pick or 2 or whatever it would cost, and still get one, midway through the teens or wherever you wind up if you do trade down. That's absolutely a possibility. I'm with you. I think they need to prioritize an edge rusher over defensive tackle. But, like I said, nothing would surprise me. This is still – look, you got to improve your defensive line. That's what it comes down to. It really doesn't matter. Like if one way or the other, they're going to try to do they're going to do something on that defensive line, whether it's with the 9th pick, whether they trade down, whether it's later in the draft. I do think that. And we got one more. We've gone all out of order with our list here. But Michael, you threw this guy up there, and then I'm gonna turn this over to you. Make your argument for Brock Bowers.
Well, I think he's an athletic freak. Like he's really good as a tight end, but he's also good as a wide receiver. And I know you have Cole Kmet obviously on the team. You got Garrett, who you signed this offseason as well. But I'm still of the mindset that you obviously take Rome Odunze, one of the wide receivers, number one. I do think that defensive, line is a priority. But man, if Brock Bowers is there, you can put him in and you can put him in at the slot, and he can be an elite slot who's just going to bully a lot of guys with his speed and his size. And you've seen it. Like, you've seen a lot of good success stories with, I mean, the obvious one is Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I don't know how I could almost forget that. For a minute, I was thinking Taylor Swift instead of Travis Kelce, and I was like, wait, that doesn't sound right. But that's the obvious, go-to. And obviously, you've got George Kittle in the league, and you've got a lot of good teams, a lot of good offenses have a great tight end. And Cole Kmet is a really good tight end, and I think you saw a big breakout year from him last season. But if you have the potential to add a playmaker like Brock Bowers with his size, with his speed, and his ability, how can you not give Caleb Williams that opportunity to give a guy who's going to be up down the middle and really create a lot of open spaces? So I think that's a really interesting, motive. I think that's a really interesting, spot to look at, especially Bowers. He hinted a little bit at the combine that he liked the Bears. He would love to play with Caleb Williams. I think everyone obviously would love to play with Caleb Williams, but I do think that's a strong possibility. Does that mean anything that, you already have two tight ends on your team? What's a third? But obviously I put him in number 5, so I don't think it's as likely, but I would definitely consider it if he's still around at 9.
We know that Shane Waldron's offense loves tight ends.
Right.
And, maybe I haven't given this scenario enough thought because, I saw them sign Gerald Everett. They got Gerald Everett. They got Cole Kmet. I don't know if you have room for another guy like on this level. But at the same time, tight end is one of those positions that they always talk about that takes a while. And maybe you get a Brock Bowers and he's not playing a whole lot right away. But I don't know that that's the direction the Bears want to go. That's just looking at the roster and what they have. I have not really seen them as likely to take Brock Bowers throughout this whole process. Now, at the same time, he is an elite pass catcher. We talk about these wide receivers. Brock Bowers is an elite pass catcher. He can elevate your passing game for sure. He's just at a different position. And so if you want to give Caleb Williams as many weapons as possible, you can definitely make the argument that Brock Bowers needs to be in that conversation. I would be a little surprised. But you can't argue against adding good players.
Right. And I think this kind of boils down to what you kind of talked about earlier with Ryan Poles, where how much do you feel like, based on learning about him the last couple of years, is he a guy who is he still at the position where at number 9, he's going to take the best player available? Or is he at this point at a position place where, well, we need wide receivers, we need pass rushers. If they're not there, we're going to trade down. Like, where do you feel like Poles is at this point where he's going to be making this decision at 9? Is he still like best player available? Let's just go with it. Or is he, well, we need this now, let's go with this. And if we can get some, trade back and still get that player, let's do it that way.
I know this team is improving. I know this team is going to have big expectations next season. To be over 500, to compete for a playoff spot. I think if you're Ryan Poles, you got to look at this thing long-term. It's only year 3 in his eyes. And so, I think you need to get the best player you think is going to help you for the next 4 to 5 years. And not really worry about your positional needs at this point in time right now, because there's always ways to add another guy. We could have a Yannick Ngakoue signing in early August, and that fills the edge rusher spot. So I really think it is going to be the best guy available and not so much the needs. And that might be confusing to some fans. That might not make everybody happy, but I do think that that's the way he's been building this team. And I think that's still how he has to build this team. He's not trying to compete for 1 year. He's trying to compete for year after year. And that takes you need to get good players, and that's regardless of position. You got to take the best player available. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest. I think that's a good thing to remember, even for fans, where it's like, I think there's going to be a lot of hype about the Bears this year. Obviously, the schedule, Caleb Williams, the talent that they have, but This team isn't winning a Super Bowl just yet. I mean, there's still a lot of, still things they need to figure out and some holes they got to figure out. So yeah, I agree with you. I think Poles has shown throughout the years, the few last couple of years, that he's, always going to, try to build the better team and get the best player available. And I think he probably does it at 9 and obviously with his later 2 picks as well. But after taking Caleb number 1. So yeah, I do think that, it could be tempting to be like, well, I can, get this player this year at this specific position and we can, compete for a wild card spot or even a division title. But in the grand scheme of things, you got to be realistic and say you have a rookie quarterback. Things aren't going to be perfect this season. Why not get the best player who's going to help you in 2, 3, 4, 5, even maybe the next decade? So, yeah, I definitely think he's probably in the mindset of take the best player available.
And that's why I say if Joe Alt is there, you have to do it. I think Ryan Poles loves Braxton Jones, and both those things can be true. If a Joe Alt is there at number 9, who's maybe a guy that you think is like a top 5 talent, I think that's a no-brainer, no matter what that means for Braxton Jones or for Larry Borum or whoever else you got on your roster. You're going to take the best player available because you see that as an upgrade to your roster. And so, yeah, I really do think it's obviously it's gonna depend what plays out ahead of them. They don't have complete control over what happens here. And so that's what makes the number 9 pick a little bit fun. Obviously Thursday night is going to be all about Caleb Williams. But there's that's kind of been a certainty, it feels like, for weeks. And so that number 9 pick it's got a little bit more questions about it. Guys, if you're watching with us live on YouTube, hit us up in the comments. Any other last questions? We're gonna answer some of your questions. If there's anything we didn't touch on that you guys want to chat about, throw it in the comments. If you're watching on Twitter, click through to YouTube and you can join the conversation that way. Before we get to any last questions, Michael, I know you had a big story on JJ McCarthy this week. We don't obviously expect him to wind up being a Chicago Bear, but he is a local guy, grew up here, played at Nazareth. What can you tell us about this guy and sort of what the Nazareth community is talking about as we approach draft night?
Well, it wasn't even like the Nazareth community. In my story, I talked to a lot of the coaches that he played against in high school. He played against Marist a couple times in the regular season, played against Batavia twice. And I talked to, who he played hockey with as a youth player before he turned to it. I know obviously the whole hockey story was a big deal for JJ McCarthy and how elusive he is. And, every story was just talking about just, his maturity at such a young age. He gets this Iowa State offer at 8th grade and he just always seemed like he was going to be an elite quarterback. And, every time, he only lost, I think it was twice in his high school career before transferring to IMG his senior year. But every time, he lost, it stung. Like he didn't go out, he didn't do anything. He just studied and tried to become better. And it was a fun story. It was fun to talk to all these different guys about, just all the different things they saw when he was a high school kid and how he's kind of progressed and turned into this, NFL prospect. And I would encourage you guys to take a look and read it. It's on Friday Night Drive and My Suburban Life and all that kind of stuff. But just a really interesting kid, a kid obviously who's mature, is really physically just really gifted and can do a lot. And I think that's why the NFL has kind of become in love with this kid. Like there's a potential that he can go number 4, or there's a potential he can go number 12. Like he pretty much decides how this draft is going to go and whether the Bears are going to get a chance to get Roma Dunze, one of these top receivers at 9. Because if you have a team like, let's just say Williams and then Daniels, and then it seems like May is probably going to go to the Patriots at this point, number 3. Are the Vikings in love with him? Are the Broncos in love with him, even though they just, traded for Zach Wilson? Do they see that potential where if you sit him for a year, he can become a really good quarterback if he learns quickly? I mean, it's really interesting. And that's kind of it was a fun way just to kind of see how this kid kind of became the prospect that everyone is talking about this cycle.
I dropped the link in the comments, guys, if you want to read Michael's story on JJ McCarthy. And yeah, I feel like the pressure is really on the Vikings right now with those 2 first-round picks. I mean, you got to think that there's a lot of pressure there to make a deal and go up and get a guy. And what happens what is their GM going to say if that doesn't pan out? If
Right.
say the Denver Broncos swoop in and get a JJ McCarthy ahead of them, or the Las Vegas Raiders, swoop in and make a trade and get a JJ McCarthy ahead of the Vikings. There could be a lot of intrigue here with the NFC North. And if the Vikings do, if they do move up and they get JJ or they get Drake May, that's going to make this either one of those quarterbacks, that's going to make this NFC North rivalry really interesting with these parallel rookie quarterbacks. They're certainly going to become must-watch games, especially if both these guys, if these quarterbacks are as good as advertised. Certainly, we expect Caleb Williams to be. It'll kind of depend what happens with the Vikings and their quarterback situation. But yeah, it's been really interesting. I only covered one JJ McCarthy high school game, and it was one of those two losses, Michael. I was at the they lost the state championship game against Mount Carmel. I think it was 2019.
Yeah.
That was a tough game for them. Their offensive line had some struggles there. I think JJ was sacked quite a bit in that game. But yeah, it's been really fun to watch his career progress, and you see so many guys transferring these days. It was really cool to see him stay at one place as well, and help bring the success that they had at Michigan last year. It's been a really interesting ride to watch, and it's really fun when you can watch somebody from your area do that.
Yeah, definitely. And just the whole community's behind them. They're going to have a watch party in McCook on Thursday. I'll be there with some Naz fans just ready to see where JJ's going to get drafted. And but yeah, the whole community is obviously behind him. Second NFL player for Nazareth. Julian Love got drafted a few years ago by the Giants. Now he's with the Seahawks. But a really cool story. And I think it'd be really cool just to see, does he go to Denver where he has Sean Payton? Does he go to Minnesota where he has Kevin O'Connell? Las Vegas obviously has a good opportunity there as well. But I am really interested to see what happens if JJ goes to a place where you have an offensive genius, like many people consider Sean Payton and Kevin O'Connell. How is he able to do there? And does he become, does it become one of those situations where, the environment really helps JJ develop into an elite quarterback?
We got to wrap it up here in a minute, but I'm going to get to a couple of your questions here, guys. Let's see. I had Rick asks, how far down is too far to trade down? Would you go past? He says, I would not go past number 13. I kind of agree. I don't think that the Bears want to trade back into the 20s. I really do think that if they make a move, they're probably only going to go back a couple of spots. Last year we saw them, drop down just one spot in that deal with the Eagles. I could certainly see something like that if there's a team in that 11, 12, 13 range who's looking to move up. Obviously that helps if there is a quarterback on the board. If JJ is there, that's gonna be the conversation as you get to that range with the Vikings and the Broncos and the Raiders. I don't expect the Bears to move down too much. Michael, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I wouldn't move down. I would definitely not move down into the 20s. I wouldn't even. I think 13 is a good number. I would say 15 maybe, but you still got to get some value for this pick. You have the number 9 pick. You shouldn't just trade it down just to, get more picks. You have a high value pick. Maybe you move down a spot or 2 or 3 or whatever, but you still need to make the most of the high pick because you're hopefully, if you're the Bears, you're thinking, well, we're picking in the 20s next year. We're not going to be in this position anymore. So this could be one of their last opportunities to have a top 10 pick if things go the way they want them to.
And when you're in the top 10, you're thinking Pro Bowl player.
Right.
I don't know that you're necessarily thinking. You can certainly get them in the 20s. I don't know that you're necessarily thinking that in the 20s. Right. Another question here says over under 4 primetime games for the Bears. I'm going over on that. I think they're probably going to have at least 5. You're looking at the Caleb Williams storylines. And certainly people expect this team to be more competitive, and to be winning a few more games than they did last year. I would expect we're going to see a lot of Bears in primetime this year.
I think you'll definitely see them the most amount of times you can see them, whatever the cap is for the NFL for how many teams can appear on primetime. I think obviously you've got the Hall of Fame game to start things off in the preseason. Would I be surprised if they're on Hard Knocks? No. Like, I think the NFL would love for them to be on Hard Knocks. It pretty much depends on whether the McCaskey family will finally, say yes or no, or whether they still have the power to say no. But yeah, you're going to see this team a lot of playing on, Monday night, Sunday night, on Thursday night, just for the Caleb Williams effect. But then also, those Packers games are actually going to be worth watching this time, as opposed to, what it's been the last few years. I'm not going to say that they're going to start winning those games, but you're hoping that they become more competitive. You got two young quarterbacks who are going to go against each other. And I can see NBC, ESPN, Amazon, all of them just like wanting those matchups. I don't even know how many noon games you get this year, just based on what this Bears team is going to have this season.
I think they're going to have a lot more primetime games. Like you said, the Hall of Fame game is basically an extra primetime game. And yeah, I mean, we're probably going to see some more 3:00 games. There's going to be a lot more interest in this Bears team with Caleb Williams on the roster, with all these additions that Ryan Poles has made. And it's going to be fun. Yeah, those Packers games, if ever, it feels like we're saying this every year, but it's like, it feels like this is the year when the Bears finally end that losing streak against the Packers. We'll see. You would think that's what everybody said week 1 last year.
Right.
I think it might be good for the Bears if that game is not week 1, maybe get a couple under your belt first, but we'll have to see. We should get the schedule in less than a month, and we'll be able to dissect that and talk about it. Guys, head over to shawlocal.com for all of our Bears coverage. We got a busy week coming up here with the draft. We'll be tweeting and sharing and Instagramming everywhere about the draft. Obviously, Caleb Williams is going to be a big storyline. We'll have plenty of coverage at that over at shawlocal.com. You can find me on Twitter, Sean_Hammond. You can find Michael at Dwojak94. And give us a follow. Do us a favor and give the show a like. We appreciate that. That's the best way to support our show. Thank you to everyone who has joined us live. And if you're joining us later, we will be tweeting out. Actually, we can already say we're expecting to do another show on Friday morning, probably same time, probably 9 a.m. If you want to join us live on YouTube, get your questions answered. We will know who the Bears have picked, both at number 1 and at number 9. It'll be a fun time. So come join us on Friday. And Michael, thanks for chatting Bears with me. He's Michael Dwojak. I'm Sean Hammond. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.